Welcome to the Postgame of the Michael Brooks Show. We are here joined by our friend and comrade, Krystal Ball.
Great to be here.
Thank you
nice
so much.
Nice to be in person. Like,
That's
it's
great.
Really special.
And we're gonna be in person in another couple of weeks, right?
Indeed.
At that was the thing I forgot to plug. That thing at Harvard.
I know. That lineup is crazy.
That lineup is amazing.
Yeah, you're gonna be there.
You, me, Katie Halper, Cornell West, who's like,
No biggie.
Philip,
NBD. Katie Halper.
Megan Day.
Agnew. Megan Halper.
Megan Agnew. No, I'm just kidding. Megan Day.
Philip
Philip Agnew. Esha.
How long is this?
Esha from historically.
Historically, how long is this panel? Is it like a mile long?
Well, no, it's two different
panels.
panels.
Oh, okay, I see.
So I know one is me, Cornell West, Philip
Agnew,
and Esha. And I'm not gonna. I know her last name, but I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce it because I will butcher it. Apologies, but historically podcast, check it out.
I've been a guest on that podcast.
What is it? Me, Megan Day, Katie Halper, and
Nomiki Konst.
That's who it is.
Nomiki Konst.
Yeah.
That is.
People are excited about that.
That is a monster. That's a monster lineup. Let's do the bad to start out. And do we have Joy Reid's? I love that picture. That picture is definitely my happy place. Look at that picture.
Nice.
Krystal, when he came out, and this guy.
You never looked happier.
I'm happy. Brianna Joy Gray had her tweet was like, my future wife looking at wedding pictures going, happiest day of my life. And me going like, yeah, same. But he comes in and he's got he really does. He's got that presence, whatever the word is. And I have to say, I can't lie. I just don't get particularly nervous about things like that until we're actually sitting there on the set waiting for it to happen. And then it hits me like, oh my, this is crazy. Like I'm in Sao Paulo. I'm at Worker Party headquarters. We're actually going to do this. He walks in and everybody's attention is on this guy. And there's this little table with these Brazilian cheese ball things and cafe espresso. And he hugs people at the door. He goes, he throws a cheese ball in his mouth, drains an espresso. And then he walks over to the three of us and the translator, he comes up and he's just I hear him say Michael. And then the translator's like, you must be Michael. That's what his voice is. He gives me this big hug. And I was like, oh my God, this is fucking far out.
See, I get nervous. My thing is, I get nervous before I am in the physical space.
Right.
There's something about the uncertainty of what is it going to look like and what's the situation and how do I get it? That, having all that uncertainty makes me nervous. But once I'm actually in the space and see the room and then mic'd up and sitting, then I'm okay. For me, it's the before.
I get, once we got mic'd up and sat down, if he came in immediately, I would have been fine.
Yeah.
It was getting mic'd up and sitting down and then waiting.
Having to think about
and then just realizing oh shit, this is actually happening. Because you don't even have time to think about that before. You're coordinating with the camera people and figuring out the translation equipment and getting the plane ticket and all of that. And then, all of a sudden he comes. And then I will say he comes in, he sits down through the translator, obviously, and he goes, all right, how about this? Leans back and he's like, you can ask me anything. No limit. If I don't know, I'll say I don't know. How's that sound? And we're all like, good. He goes, okay. All right,
Deal.
I'm ready to go.
Deal.
Let's go to the exact opposite of Lula da Silva and go to the bad segment. Do we have our opening sound package for bad?
But it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good. No good, really bad for you, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I love that. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Can we do the Khashoggi, the test with Krystal? Oh, okay. We always have to do this test now.
Oh, no.
All right. This is Donald Trump. These are three sound drops from one. He's talking about one issue, one thing.
Okay.
I want you to guess. We've done this with Richard Wolff and Matt Christman so far. I want you to guess what he's talking about. And then we will go to Joyanne Reid.
I have a little bit of sound problem.
Sound problem?
Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, here we go.
All right, let's go.
Here's the first one.
The first one.
Bad deal. Should have never been thought of.
Okay.
All right. Number two.
And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it.
Two. All right, now three.
And they had the worst cover-up ever.
All right, what is he talking about? Do you need to hear it again?
The worst cover-up ever.
Oh, she's okay. Good. Good. You want to hear him
Bad
again?
deal. Should have never been thought of. And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it. And they had the worst cover-up ever.
I mean, okay, I don't think this is right, but I'm going to guess Iran.
Okay, you're in the ballpark. He is talking about the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi.
Oh my God. At least I was overseas.
Yeah, it was
so-
overseas. So you had Middle East, you're in the ballpark, and where it should have stopped was from the idea phase from the deal standpoint at the idea phase.
Also, just a note to Forrest, who edits these clips. You're the third person I think we've tested
Yes,
on this, and
third person.
0 for 3 have gotten it right.
Zero
Because I
for
think
What did
Got
the
it
others
right.
guess? Do you remember?
what did Chrisman guess?
I think Chrisman went very basic. I think he said like NAFTA or something. Yeah. People are not.
People are not geared into that.
I'm
about
starting
a
to
murder.
become embarrassed by how well I know Trump because I'm listening to these guesses. I'm like, no, of course he's
course not.
talking about murdering a journalist. Is no one else paying attention?
Obviously. I knew. In
He's the
fairness,
president.
I knew that my guess was wrong. I just didn't have anything better. So
Bad
I
deal.
doubt anyone will get it right
I
unless
don't
they listen
think-
to the show. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, unless they have forewarning, they won't get it right. All right, this is, and I just want to own, I've seen the headlines. I've not wanted to subject myself to this yet. So this is Joanne Reed with a body language expert. I believe a body language expert who's also appeared on Fox News.
that's what I saw. I do like how you didn't want to subject yourself to it, but you do want to subject your audience to it.
They've already all watched it 50 times. I know how this works. Believe me, if you haven't watched this yet and you want to maintain that, skip over this because this is a bad idea and where it should have
Bad
stopped
deal.
was from the idea standpoint at the deal stage. Okay, let's watch it.
Dust up between the two of them is that scandals hurt you more when they seem plausible, right? I mean, Bernie Sanders does have a sort of physicality, you know, when he talks that is a shaking your
Pause
fingers.
it. Anti-Semitism. You know, I whip out this like anti-Semitism thing as kind of like a mockery of like the fact that they always accuse him of bullshit. But I'm actually going to say on that one, borderline anti-Semitism, like legit. This is the same person who basically compared Bernie Sanders to like a squatter or something. Anyways, it's worth knowing.
This is I think the caricature that I think a lot of people have been saying this sort of rhetoric invokes.
Yes. Yes. All right, I won't pause it again. I just did want to say like that's amazing. That is actually kind of problematic.
That is a shaking your finger
Yes.
at Hillary Clinton,
Yes.
shaking your finger, shovey, weirdy. You know, his physicality
Yes.
makes me think, yeah, he could have said, you know, listen, I think in this environment a woman can't win. That doesn't seem like a
Well,
crazy
first of
thing
all,
for him
I
to
think
say.
I think Bernie's lying. We see him; he slouches forward anyway, Joy. But here he turtles. If you look at his eye level, where he normally answers questions, when he makes the denial, his whole shoulders come up like a little kid getting caught. His eye level is below his shoulders. This is trying to hide in plain sight. And many of us, we don't know what to look for. So if you look for this right out of the gate, and the strongest denial is simply saying no. And I think women in particular, we want to believe human beings. So we're like, yeah, I would say that. He literally said, well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. That's 9 words. Unnecessary. No. Did you vote for Donald Trump in the last election?
Absolutely no.
Right? So no. Did you dress up as an Easter bunny on Easter?
Absolutely no.
Right? So it's
Did you
no.
help
We
Donald
say
Trump get
no. Absolutely
elected?
is actually not
Did
the
you write
strongest
homophobic
denial.
blog
You're
posts?
playing with me here in the game, but at least you're getting the no in here. We're not hearing the no with Bernie.
All right. Wow.
We're not hearing the no.
What a big moment for this body language expert, by the way. You could tell, it's like, this is huge for her career.
This is huge. My pseudoscience can help sink a great candidate. What do you make of that? I see why I did not want to subject myself to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, the idea that the setup of his physicality told me he may have said this thing, like the fact that he talks with his hands means that he must lie. Again, problematic.
Like actually problematic, like amazingly so.
But the other thing is, and this whole Warren thing has reminded me of the fact that if you just watch cable news, you think everyone in America hates Bernie Sanders. Like, you think people don't like him, that there's this vast majority who don't trust him, who don't like him, who think he's sexist, all these things, when in fact the total opposite is the case. He has the highest favorability ratings of any of the candidates, most popular senator in the entire country. But they're so disconnected with that reality because they have this like visceral hatred of him that, you know, they'll go to any length that is way beyond where they would ordinarily let themselves go to justify their smearing of him, to further this narrative that he's sexist and borderline racist and disliked, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, that's how you end up with a great television moment like this.
I remember a year ago when you called me up and I was just like, a woman could never host Rising.
Yeah. I wasn't going to tell anyone because we're good
no,
like
you were
that.
You were gonna wait until we were up against each other for some type of anchoring gig, but which we were gonna share because somehow, even though it was for one position, we were in a unity ticket.
That's right, unity. Not allowed to point out the differences.
Now, Krystal, in addition to being a writer, political analyst, host, and politician, I would say, you're also a body language expert.
That's right.
And we have some old clips now of Joyanne Reid, who, look, and obviously I totally believe Joyanne Reid because she doesn't use her hands very much. So I think that when she denies that this massive cachet, and this, by the way,
#believe women.
Right. But this actually is legitimately my general fucking pet peeve here. If she came out and just said, I'm sorry, I wrote this stuff, I was in a different time of my life, I grew up with certain beliefs, I apologize unequivocally, that's it. I would even today, as I think she is a malignant force on television, not go after her over this, because that's just my belief. Instead, and she wrote these or allegedly wrote these relentless homophobic tweets about Charlie Crist, who's the former governor of Florida, now a congressman. Charlie Crist, by the way, now he's a conservative Democrat. He did sign one Lula letter, so got to give him some props. But what are some of the things that the Russian bots wrote about Charlie Crist?
Basically writing a whole bunch of blog posts calling him Miss Charlie and tagging it like not gay politicians and things like that.
Right. So if she came out and said, you know what, I apologize, this is a mistake. I want to really reiterate, I would not go after her about this.
No.
I wouldn't. I really, truly my belief system. But instead, what she did was this. But I look, well, of course I believe her because she doesn't use her hands. But at the same time, Krystal, you're a body language expert.
All right, let me watch.
Let's check this out.
I've spent a lot of time trying to make sense of these posts. I hired cybersecurity experts to see if somebody had manipulated my words or my former blog. And the reality is they have not been able to prove it. But here's what I know. I genuinely do not believe I wrote those hateful things.
We have to cut on Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
to get her one to
she
cover.
earned that one. She earned.
It's so painful to watch because, like you said, but I understand why this is not a justification. But the type of politics that she espouses, she is very much of the if you don't use the right words.
Right.
She is the part of the let's cancel you even for the slightest infraction 10 years ago. You can't espouse those politics and then ask for forgiveness. So
Right.
she had to go down the line of being I don't know, it wasn't me. That's all I can tell you. Because to admit that it's you and ask for forgiveness is to go directly against the type of politics that she claims to believe in.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think it is just all kidding aside, a good reminder that the people besmirching Bernie Sanders are literally the people who came out on television and were just I have security experts looking at my blog. Come on.
I know.
Honestly, a certain type of person is so comfortable that they are so much more intelligent than the average Trump voter. And I'll put it this way. I'm actually not interested in defending the average Trump voter. I do think a lot of them in conservative media are mostly totally fucking moronic. And the only thing that I would add to that is so are you. You watch that and you take that you aren't even just pissed off as a human being that someone is trying to pass such an obvious fucking hustle on you. It's embarrassing. I don't think that I wrote that, and I have secure like. And by the way, who are the security people? Like Malcolm Nance, an ultra reliable source.
No, he would have figured it out if it was.
Oh
him.
yeah, he would. Oh no, he would have been like, well, no, Vladimir
It was
Putin.
the Russians back
Vladimir
in
Putin
1972.
planned to do this to you in 1997 because he saw a demo tape you did at a college radio station and knew that you would rise during the Obama era. These people are fucking insane.
But it does just go to that deeper point of just imagine like the worst thing you ever said, did, Googled, photo taken, any of that. Like there are so many things I've said and done in my life that it was blared into a headline or blasted out on Twitter, like it would be the end. And so when you do have something like that, and this is a message to people like Joy and the politics that they espouse, like you have to look at it, Cher. You have to believe that people can evolve and own up to it and hope that you can further the dialogue and hope that you can engender that kind of forgiveness when you see failings in others rather than just trying to lie and obfuscate, which just ends up looking absurd. But apparently it was the right thing because she's still at MSNBC. She's still,
she's
gets
still
to bring on her
smearing
body
Bernie.
language
Right.
experts to spear Bernie. Absolutely.
Right. No, but you're totally right. And again, for everybody who defends that kind of shit, it's fundamentally reactionary. It's all individual moralism. And again, how could you possibly synchronize that kind of trash with the idea that we want to like radically reduce the prison population and we want to have a much more forgiving, evolving culture and politics? It's ridiculous. And I can't even, I don't want to bring like the Lula stuff into this, but I just like, could you imagine if like Lula said, no, these charges are bullshit. It's a lie. And here's why, and here's how it fits. It was just like, I don't think I did that, but it could be bloggers from Russia. It's just the most transparently embarrassing thing you've ever seen in your life.
A Scooby-Doo voice or something there.
What is this Pete thing? Because we'd like to have Krystal go off on Mayo Pete.
So the New York Times has been videotaping their discussions with the candidates.
This is fun.
The New York Times editorial board looks very physically inspiring.
Yeah, I think it's Benjamin Applebaum asked him about his time working for McKinsey.
A Russian said that. They controlled my voice modulator.
They hacked in, yeah.
Because I don't actually think I would say anything like that.
We're going to get Malcolm Nance to look into that.
Yeah, I want Malcolm Nance to look into Russian interference. In fact, anything I've ever said that offended you was a Russian voice manipulation. Malcolm Nance is looking into it.
So he gets asked about how a company that McKinsey was working for and who Pete bragged about becoming an expert on bread prices turned out to be fixing bread prices, and Pete gets confronted with that. And
okay, good job.
Pete gets upset that about being linked to bread prices, but not about sort of corporate layoffs, which is kind of funny. So
okay, I love it.
Corporate price fixing. You've been on the front lines of corporate downsizing. You've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing. You've been on the front lines of our misadventures.
I'm sorry,
of our misadventures in foreign policy. You've had direct experience of many of the things that make a lot of young people very angry about the way that this country is operating right now. You don't seem to embody that anger.
So the proposition that I've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing is just to get that out of the way.
You worked for a company that was fixing bread prices.
No, I worked for a consulting company that had a client that may have been involved in fixing, or was apparently in a scandal. I was not aware of the Canadian bread pricing scandal until last night.
Wow. Well, did he convince you? Okay, Krystal, you're a body language expert.
Did you see the turtle?
Yeah, I actually did. That's the problem. I actually did. Did some consultants say, you know what, Pete, say bullshit because you're young?
That's right. It'll be edgy. Help you with the millennial vote.
Yeah, they were responding to Bernie because he says things like bullshit.
You know, that whole exchange, if you play it out, is interesting because they actually ask him a couple of good questions here on McKinsey. And one of them was whether he would recommend to a college senior that they go and work at McKinsey, which I thought was a very smart question. And he was basically like, yeah, it depends, but basically yes.
Disqualifying.
Which just tells
Disqualifying.
you, I mean, look, McKinsey should be viewed in the same way as like being a tobacco lobbyist. Like it's the same type of just mercenary. I'm going to make money by destroying other people's lives. Like that's what I'm going to do. In some ways, it's even worse though because it's what our best and brightest have been sold on, that you know you can do good and make good money, and that this is the proper career path for someone who has the kind of pedigree and obvious, you know, respect for his own intellect that a Pete has. And while he may say the words about, oh, I'm disappointed in their work here or there or whatever, he doesn't have any sort of real critique. He doesn't really feel that there's anything wrong with what they do. They're just providing client service. How could you like have a problem with that? And that disconnect.
Solid impression, low key. I like it.
That disconnect is exactly why people of his own generation have such complete contempt for him.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't add anything else other than, I mean, I find the whole premise of him just embarrassing. Like, honestly, I mean, I'm not even saying, like, I actually agree with, I got some pushback. Like, you know what? If there was some, like, if Bernie Sanders was 40 and he was running for president as mayor of Burlington, I would vote for him, right? Like, it's not just because
I don't care about the experience.
Yeah, I don't care about
that doesn't resonate.
Who
with
cares
me at all.
about that? I agree with you. But, you know, I do actually, though, I thought what Klobuchar hit him on was totally legit. Like, dude, you're talking about having this special value proposition and you lost statewide.
Well,
like, that's ridiculous.
She called him on basically, being a fraud because his whole gambit is it's a sort of weird regional identity politics where it's like, I'm from the Midwest, ergo I can win the Midwest, which is just as ridiculous as thinking that, you know, Deval Patrick was going to win South Carolina because he's black, right? And so, I mean, just that kind of hollow, like, oh, they're like me, so I'm going to vote for them. It doesn't work out in any way that it's been tried. And so she was calling bullshit on that, and that was effective. But it's not his lack of experience that is the issue. It's his whole worldview and approach that is the issue for me, much more so than that, you know, he's only been mayor. And by the way, the track record as mayor
horrible.
Is nothing to write home about.
Horrible. I believe I'm going to be on with you on Wednesday on the Hill. Supposedly we're talking about impeachment.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I'm assuming that's probably going to change.
Well, no, I mean, I asked to have you on to talk about Lula, so that's my plan. We'll work that
Lula
out.
said to me, they're going to try to change it. But you talk about it on the Hill. What's on their radar? But before, take a couple of minutes and just, we'll have many more conversations like this, but we're a couple weeks out now. I mean, what do you do some predicting?
Oh, gosh.
Is Bernie solid? I think he's going to take Iowa and New Hampshire. I do.
I don't want to go out that far on a limb, even though my heart says you're right. Mm-hmm. But I am very keenly aware of my own bias in this regard.
Fair.
Let's be clear.
Yep.
However, here's what I will say. If he's tied in the polls going into Iowa, he will win Iowa because they do discount his support. I mean, I looked back at the numbers. In 2016, he outperformed his Iowa numbers by about 4.5 points. Of course, in Michigan, he outperformed his poll numbers by like 22 points. I wouldn't expect that. But he does consistently outperform his poll numbers. Elizabeth Warren has done more to energize the Bernie base than anyone possibly could have done.
And CNN.
I mean, and CNN with the assist there. So I think you're going to have Bernie supporters who are dragging the whole family and their basketball team and their next door neighbors all to caucus with them. So I think he is well positioned. And here's the other thing I would say. Ultimately, you know, impeachment going on means that the race is basically frozen. News coverage is going to be wall to wall of this trial. It's going to be very hard for Obama world or the Clintonites or whoever to really launch any new attacks on him at this point because it's just going to be a lot harder to break through. There's no more debates. So I think things are more or less frozen where they are.
So you actually think that the tactical, because the theory before was that this was done to hurt Bernie potentially.
Yeah.
And now you're saying it might actually be benefiting
Well,
him.
I don't know if you've noticed this. Democrats not always master strategists. And look,
right.
If you talk to, and having, been involved in campaigns myself, this is not just spin, like when most of the impact of campaigning is not actually the candidate themselves on the ground, right? The people that go to Bernie rallies are already going to go and caucus for him. They're already supporters of his. At this point in the game, especially, you've already collected their data, et cetera, et cetera. So in some ways, when he's there on the ground, it actually sucks up resources that could be devoted to other activities that would more directly translate at this point into turning people out. So I don't honestly think that him not being able to physically be there is all that important at this stage in the game. The one thing I will say is because the whole impeachment narrative centers around Joe Biden, that is somewhat elevating to him, even though it's not a good look for him, but it makes him look like, he's the one that Donald Trump's afraid of and he's central to the narrative, et cetera. But in terms of the actual logistics and the problems of not being able to be on the ground, I don't worry about that.
Last thing, do you have a new read or thought on impeachment?
I have the same
read.
Thought on impeachment, which is... especially as we've watched the nation almost be dragged into war in the Middle East, with this illegal assassination of Soleimani, that we've spent so much more energy on this Ukrainian phone call, which I'm not saying it's fine what he did. That's not fine. It's not okay.
Crystal Ball said problem. It was the best call that ever happened in presidential history.
Right.
The body language expert on TMBS, she said it. She said it.
That's right.
Yes.
Exactly what I said. So, I'm not saying that it's fine, but on the scale of things that Trump has done that's been a problem, it's dwarfs in comparison to almost getting us into a massive war on, illegal grounds. And Aaron Mate said really well, he's like, it tells you everything about the Democratic Party that we've organized protests around Jeff Sessions' job security.
Oh my God.
And none around let's stay out of war. So
right.
That's my thought.
Yeah. I mean, I still want to figure out, because they are doing it, how it can be used effectively. But we'll see.
You're more optimistic than me. I think we should just get it over with. And
well, I don't think I think my thing is that my only pushback against a certain kind of left discourse is that everybody should remember that Trump is actually really unpopular. And I think that is if they weren't the Washington Generals of politics, mm-hmm. and they actually had a coherent coalition, this would be a very winnable election.
Completely. Yeah. It's so easy. The case is so easy to make. Yeah. I mean, he promised to deliver and he didn't deliver. I mean, if you look at the manufacturing's in a recession, people have not had their problems. The addiction crisis continues. I mean, just that basic level argument, healthcare is a central part of that. And it's the number one issue for voters. Easy to make the case, but instead they can't make that case. The establishment can't make that case because it implicates them, right? It implicates the type of politics that they've bought into for 30 plus years. And so they don't want to do it. They'd rather team up with the national security state apparatus on this Ukraine thing and the norms and guardrails conversation with the never Trump Republicans who justified torture and lied us into war, than actually having that more sort of structural critique, because it's problematic for them too.
I just like that it takes up Trump's time. That really is my favorite part of impeachment. Every hour that's used to defend this is an hour that isn't being used to develop new ways of torturing migrants. But True. The politics, and that's a really good thing. But I think the politics of it are just, I mean, yeah, I even just going in on stuff like more simple corruption stuff. I don't get it.
Yeah, the hollowness too.
Yeah.
Of the day that they vote for the articles of impeachment in the House, the very next day they hand him this massive win with this new trade deal. I mean,
which Warren is a supporter of?
Which Warren supports and Chuck Schumer opposes. That says a lot.
Way to resist, guys.
Way to resist, guys. Krystal Ball, you're amazing. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Nice to see you in person.
And I'll see you very soon in person.
Indeed.
And
next
I will
week.
see you on Wednesday on the Hill. And then what's the date again? March 7th? March 7th. It's going to be awesome. All
Bell
right.
House. It's
Let's
gonna
take
be
like a 20-second break, and then I'll say goodbye properly, and then we will be back with the great Ben Burgess. Thank you so much. Welcome back, Saturday TMBS. We just had awesome time at Krystal Ball. Now we'll have an awesome time with the great Ben Burgess. He's author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. He's the proprietor of a great Patreon page. Become a patron of it. He also teaches logic and rhetoric at Perimeter State College. And he's a regular on the David Feldman Show, which is another podcast that I'm a massive fan with, along with Harvey K. Feldman just snagging all of that TMBS content. Ben, you ready for your song?
Oh, yeah.
I want to go to mockery really badly.
I will.
So please go.
Okay.
That's my favorite part.
Logical analysis. You're going to show us how to argue that. Go.
This is based on data from a bunch of different countries. There's abundant evidence that at this point that's bullshit. Breaking down these right-wing arguments and looking at how they're supposed to fit together.
Okay, break it down. Break it down. Break it down. At one point, Lula looked at me and he said, "This is based on data." I'm just kidding. That didn't happen.
My God, that would be so amazing.
That would be amazing. Ben Burgess, how are you, my friend?
I am excellent.
What are we debunking today, buddy?
All right. Well, today we're going to look at that other Ben, who I have an article about in the next day or two, I think, at Jacobin, called Ben Shapiro, Keyboard Drone Pilot.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And here, this is one we've been talking about doing for a little bit, and other things have come up, but a couple weeks ago, of course, the United States assassinated Qasem Soleimani, and the United States and Iran seemed to be on the brink of war for a couple days. And Ben Shapiro had some typically insightful and level-headed things to say about this.
And also a fun, I guess we'll get to it later, but one of our good friends also took him for a spin and beat the crap out of him. But I guess we'll get to that later.
Well, actually, we should start there because.
Okay, so this is our friend. The first we'll start with Emma Vigeland. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me read her tweet that got this all started. And this, of course, is a very smart point by Emma, as is usually her points. Imagine the Iranian government assassinated Mike Pompeo with a drone at the direction of the president and called it self-defense. That's exactly what the U.S. did by killing Soleimani, an act of war. The only difference is Iran's self-defense claims would be more legitimate. That's objectively true. Then
that
we go... Yeah,
obviously true, yes.
Obviously true. It's not even remotely controversial. And then... The cool kids philosopher, in the words of the New York Times, found that quote, and he said this: he quote tweeted Emma Vigeland. Soleimani was one of the leading terrorists on the planet, was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, was planning further attacks on Americans, and was on foreign soil doing so. Spot on comparison there, Sparky. Okay, and then should I just read all of these before you?
Let's just go through the whole
Okay,
bunch.
And then Emma responded, "Your nativism is amusing. Trump, Obama, and Bush all committed war crimes. Should they be assassinated on the spot? Question mark. Right? Are you aware of?" And the only thing I would add to Emma is that one of those answers for little Benny might be in doubt, but we'll get back to that at another time. Are you aware of how many deaths Trump and Pompeo are directly responsible for? Civilian deaths, or do you not care because they're Arabs who, quote, live in open sewage with the deep cut?
I will interject there to say that that's a quote from a classic Ben Shapiro tweet where he said, if I remember from memory, the difference between Israelis and Palestinians, or I think he just said Arabs, is that Israelis like to build things and Arabs like to live in open sewage. # settlements rock.
Yup. And of course, that's on Ben Shapiro's long blog web chain of things that you can't criticize me for anymore because I've made insincere apologies about.
Which really, I've got to say, by the way, you were just talking about how like Joy Reid is playing this ridiculous game and about like pretending that time-traveling computer hackers put homophobic things on her blog.
Russians. Russians, yes. Ben. Russians.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
But of course, I mean, stupid people would, right? But like, none of us would say that if she just like came clean about that, like, and she just sort of sincerely said, "Hey, here's what I've learned in the ensuing, whatever decades."
Of course.
That, none of us would hold it against her. Say, of course, this is absolutely, we all believe in moral progress. We wouldn't be able to consistently oppose mass incarceration if we didn't.
Right.
But this is like Ben Shapiro's big list of all the things that I've said take backsies about, which is what that basically is.
That's the line in my book, actually. This is my take backsies list.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's such a ridiculous parody of the idea of moral progress that, like, he's still essentially saying things that amount to the same thing. It's just that, like, at this point, he's found it convenient to rebrand himself in a way such that he doesn't want to quite say that. So he'll, like, just strike that off the list. Like, yeah, I think I might also, I don't remember if I'm quoting your book at this point or, whatever, but like, it's like the scene in Oliver Stone's Nixon when Nixon is going through the transcripts of his tapes, crossing things out and saying, "Nixon can't say that. That sounds anti-Semitic."
Right. Yeah, that's a great scene. He's like, Nixon never would say that. That sounds like a racist. Not a actual recognition of anti-racism in himself. Emma goes on. Ben, you should do that singular push-up you've been putting off for 30 years and enlist. So you can fulfill your dream of killing Muslim civilians in person. In response, and that's of course
change, because I think that Ben may have realized at this point that it might just be time to for him to let this one go. But he did still keep on tweeting about the Soleimani assassination, and that brings us to the last one.
Yeah, and this is a weird. I mean, this is a double game right wingers play a lot, which is all of a sudden out of nowhere pivoting and like drawing a legitimate point, which would invalidate everything they're saying, but using it to just sort of like by your logic justify an assassination. So from like the sort of big dick swinging or little dick swinging of the beginning tweets. Now Ben Shapiro is going to be much more sort of judicious. Barack Obama routinely droned terrorists abroad, including American citizens who presented far less of a threat to Americans and American interests than Soleimani. So spare me the hysterics about quote-unquote assassination. Now, of course, I don't want to speak on Emma's behalf, but Emma's, I've had many conversations with Emma, and Emma's extremely well informed on foreign policy issues, particularly in the Middle East. I would imagine that Emma would have objections to President Obama's use of drones more broadly as well. In fact, I know she does.
And we don't have to speculate because earlier in this conversation that he came off so well in, she said Obama committed war crimes.
Right.
So this seems pretty, like and granted, this tweet isn't specifically directed at her, but like he just picked a fight with her, lost that fight, and now he's just tweeting at, I don't know, whatever, like anybody in general in the world who would object to this, and pretending that the person he uses as an example didn't actually also oppose Obama's drone policy, which she kind of explicitly said that she did. I mean, that's presumably the main thing being referred to there. Or one of the main things. So this is so what he's doing here when he's saying that, like, okay, you progressives, whatever, whoever the presumable target of this is, you all loved Obama and agreed with him about everything, right? Which is
absolutely
a false right?
Absolutely.
And Obama routinely drone terrorists abroad, including American citizens. Everything he says here in this part is true, right? But then he goes from that to spare me the hysterics about assassination. What he's doing here is actually kind of important to kind of take a beat to say what it is, because this is a really common right-wing argumentative tactic, and it's an example of what's sometimes called the tu quoque fallacy, or the appeal to hypocrisy, which is a version of ad hominem, where you're saying, like, basically, hey, you're a hypocrite, therefore you're wrong about this, right? Like, there's an inconsistency between this other thing that you're okay with and this which you're against, therefore you're wrong about this. And it's kind of important to see why that doesn't follow, because, okay, granted, even though the person he picked out to be his example to try to like make a point about horrible anti-American leftists clearly does not fall into this. It is also true that there are people who are liberals, who are much less savvy about geopolitics than Emma Vigeland is, who didn't have a problem with Obama's drone policy but do object to this. Now, two things about that. One, that's not necessarily inconsistent, actually, because, obviously I was very much opposed to the drone policy. You were, everybody, who's associated with this is. But in fact, if you're just looking at possible positions somebody could have, the reasons to oppose the Soleimani assassination go way beyond the reasons to oppose any drone assassination. All the reasons to oppose any drone assassination apply to this, but most drone assassinations didn't risk the sort of escalation of conflict that would have claimed as many lives as this could have if this had gone the way that it seemed like it was going to for a day or two. So there actually is a consistent position there. But more importantly, even if you say, oh yeah, all right, anybody who's against this, who didn't have a problem with Obama's drone policy, is being a hypocrite. They're inconsistent. Okay, well, just the fact that you're being inconsistent, and this is something I think in my book, this was one of the 12 rules for reasoning at the end, right? The fact that you're being inconsistent, that doesn't tell you, that just shows that you're wrong about something.
Right.
It doesn't tell you what part you're wrong about. So this, so instead of, so spare me about the hysterics about assassination, how about, yeah, actually come to think of it, right? Doesn't this, wasn't that drone program pretty bad? Didn't, in fact, all the people like Glenn Greenwald, et cetera, who were screaming bloody murder about the drone program at the time have a point? Because one of the things they always said was, even if you trust Obama with this kind of power, the next person who's in office might be some crazy Republican you wouldn't trust.
Right. There it is. And of course, some great, excellent Emma Vigeland material that we wanted to recognize both on the merits and also on the dunking. Ben Burgess, as always, absolute pleasure. Thank you, brother. Check it out. Give them an argument, Logic for the Left, and Ben Burgess's Patreon page. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, folks. We're going to get to, obviously, we're going to have a normal show on Tuesday, so ton to get to. Here's what we're going to do. A few Discord questions, and let's do a gem real quick. You want to knock your gem out, David? Yeah. All right.
So, I've been thinking a lot over this week. I had a little bit of time, and I've been thinking about how transformative Bernie Sanders' movement has been about changing the conversation around healthcare, and how that's brought so many people into this movement. So that got me thinking, what is the next big kind of groundswell strategy that we need to take?
Yeah.
And I really think that we need to be articulating a politics about that addresses housing.
Yes.
Because we really are living through a housing crisis right now. Everybody across all different stratus, all different wealth levels in this country are really dealing with the one, when it comes to people who are renting, the unaffordability of renting. I was reading something that was very devastating in Texas Monthly today about how renting in Houston, Houston is not as attractive as a city to a lot of other people, but it's always been, the argument is like, well, you can come to Houston, you can have big city opportunities and pay significantly less.
Right.
Well, this big Texas Monthly study came out and found that actually when you include like transportation costs, etc., it's only around like $80 cheaper than New York City. And there's probably some flaws with that study, but the general fact of it
is it ain't that inexpensive.
Sorry?
It's not that inexpensive.
Oh, it's not that inexpensive.
Right. I guess what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just saying like flaws accounted for.
Oh yeah, no, the flaws are just sort of like the way that they're calculating rent costs in New York City is probably a little bit funky because for most people they are spending 50 to 60% of their rent, and the way that they were calculating that seemed a little off to me. But anyways, the point is that even in cities like that all across the country, you talk to anybody, they can't afford to live. People who have put modest amounts of money into their households have been devastated over the past couple of decades, especially black families. I mean, like, we really need to understand that, like, for most black families, like the middle class black families, housing wealth was the majority of their wealth. And when that got evaporated in the financial crisis, remember, black families were foreclosed on way more as a percentage than white families. You saw lots of loss of wealth for families. So this is something that really unites people across different geographies, races, and even class. And it's becoming it's getting worse and worse. So there was an article out in the Wall Street Journal called Aiming at Wealthy Renters, Developers Build More Luxury Apartments Than They Have in Decades, which found that 80% of new buildings that are coming up are luxury apartments. And that's becoming the reality. So all of these cities, they're seeing the inner core becoming completely dominated by these luxury buildings that aren't meant for people on any kind of normal working class salary can afford. And they're just being held as investment properties for the super rich. We talked about Moms for Housing earlier and like what they're trying to do to raise awareness to the crisis in Oakland. And that's exactly the, kind of strategy that we can take. But, we also need to be coming up with macro political solutions to this crisis. And I just add two quick things before I start to get to the solutions. One is this goes back to one of the very classic Marxist concepts, is the difference between use value and exchange value. So use value is the value that an object, a commodity, or something like housing is to you. So what do you use it for? You use it to keep you safe, to house you, to live a life in, etc. That's the use value. That's where you get value from it. And then there's the exchange value, and that's its value on the market. So how much money you can get for it. What capitalism does is it distorts the relationship between use value and exchange value. Because exchange value, because you can own as much as you can own more than you could ever consume in capitalism, exchange value becomes the most important metric for the super rich. And that's why you see all these people and all these corporations like Wedgwood, which is the company that owned the house that these women were evicted from in Oakland, are just buying up housing to hold as an investment, because over the past, since the 70s, we've made this huge movement. We've made this huge movement to push for property values to go up, because that was supposed to benefit, small homeowners, but it's really just benefited the super rich, and it's made most of these cities unlivable. And the second thing too that happens when you push up property values in this exponential way is it's really a tool of gentrification. Not always, but I'll tell you, in my home city of Austin, absolutely was something that was used to completely clear out neighborhoods. Yep. Yes, those people end up selling their properties and they get money for that. But what happens is that's a quick way to actually completely rezone a district, because you say, oh, this poor black neighborhood, we're just going to say that the value is worth more here, and then boom, those people can't afford the property taxes, and you've completely eradicated a neighborhood. Now you can build skyscrapers. It's just an unjust way to do city planning. So, what is there to be done? We talk a lot about things like, creating rent freezes. That's happening in Berlin right now. But they're having to fight against investors who are now creating essentially a capital strike. So landlords are refusing to do repairs. People are refusing to do further development or invest in the city. And the left government, the government that's in control of Berlin, is now going to have to face down like the capitalist class. I'm not saying whether or not they can win. Hopefully they can. But they won't be able to do that without having people prepared to fight against these corporations, because these corporations are going to hold out. They're going to make things difficult for people in the short term so that they can benefit in the long term. People need to be able to fight back against this. But, rent control is only one part of the solution. We really need to be taking control of the housing stock. So we can do that through building public housing. We can do that through taxing empty units, and then saying, the city or the state government or the community land trust is going to buy those units, and we're going to use those for public housing. Here's the fact. We need to take control socially of our housing stock, or else this is going to continue to get worse, because the private model has made more and more people homeless. It's made most working class Americans, middle class Americans, lose incredible amounts of money when you see the financialized nature of the housing model that we have in the United States at the current time. And it's creating a situation where housing is pretty much controlled by a few companies and the super rich. And that's not a model that's sustainable, and it's something that absolutely needs to change. So we need to really start pushing this housing issue as a complete socialist issue in the same way that we pushed changing our healthcare system in the United States.
I agree.
And the fact that that's a conversation that, you can go into most people and they've actually have had their perspective change dramatically in the past 4 years, we can start to do that with housing. It might seem a little outlandish and crazy now, but people all understand that this is not a sustainable model.
Absolutely.
There's this news story that came out in the past couple of weeks. Why Manhattan skyscrapers are empty. Approximately half of the luxury condo units that have come onto the market in the past 5 years are still unsold, and those should just be seized. Like that should not be tolerated. And
Absolutely. Let me just read. We got 2 questions. We'll get to a bunch more stuff on Tuesday, but we'll leave for now.
Also, let people know we got a show for you tomorrow to recapping Michael's trip to interview Lula.
Yes, and that was you'll enjoy that. Mop, have you had a chance to read up about the Abe protests in Japan? No, I was in Brazil interviewing Lula, but I will try to catch up on that. I think that is significant, particularly contextualizing it in the context with what's happening in Korea and the rise of China and so on. As I say, it's easier when I have a baseline in a country. I have much less of a baseline in Japan, but it's something that I do intend to look into. It looks really interesting. Soy Captain, hey Mike, I did catch this actually in passing. I know it's hard to get back into UK politics after all of our shit, but the right-wing Labour Party are weaponizing anti-Catholic attacks against the left-wing candidate Becky Long Bailey. I want to just say really quickly, that is mind-blowing how sleazy and crazy that is from what I've seen, to basically play on like anti-Irish sentiment against a young socialist leader. We'll talk about it more. But I've wanted to sort of stay out of the labor race because I don't know enough about the various candidates. I do think that there's lessons that need to be taken from defeat. I mean, obviously we had to go all in on Corbyn and McDonnell because they were great and because they were facing an uphill battle. But I have a lot of respect for Rebecca Long Bailey. I think she's really cool. I think she has great policy. I think she has great ideas. And in the same ethos as the anti-Semitism bullshit with Corbyn, the sexism bullshit with Sanders, this anti-Irish stuff with her, which as far as from what I can see has zero basis in any of her policies or politics. It's like 1960s anti-Kennedy stuff. It's like a papist. I mean, it makes me really want to support her and cover her more on the show.
I just add that, as this race continues. Oh, sorry, am I good now? As this race continues, I was talking to some of my friends in the UK about this specific attack, and it's so disgusting. This right wing of the Labour Party has never stood up for abortion rights, and they have always been a problem for people who are fighting for women's rights to health care in that country. And now they're going to try to use this as a cynical attack against somebody who isn't even against abortion. They're just trying to muddy the water. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And it just is a reminder that there's a lot of things that have to happen in the UK, but dealing with the right wing of the Labour Party is tantamount. I mean, it's probably one of the most important things that's going to have to be done in the next few years if the Labour Party is going to be a viable left-wing political party in the coming years.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be talking more about Rebecca Long Bailey. It's disgusting. All right, folks. Fun kind of think tank recap episode tomorrow. Tuesday, we're back. We've got the Bell House show coming up. I'll just say it for all of you really quick, but we're going to be announcing next week a show with Anna Kasparian in Austin, which we're very excited about. The Harvard event, the book. I really legitimately start sounding like Obama.
Yeah, you did tired. Obama.
That's actually what I sound. There's a lot of projects. TMBS doing a lot of things. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See you on Tuesday.